In episode 147 of the Guitar Music Theory podcast, I interview Carrie Underwood keyboardist Scott Sheriff. Greetings, guitar engineers. Welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. I am your host, Desi Cerna. And today I interview Carrie Underwood keyboardist Scott Sheriff. Scott not only tours with Carrie Underwood, but he has also served as the musical director for Kenny Loggins and the band leader for Steven Curtis Chapman. Scott also has musical projects he does on the side when he's not on the road, including the Huey Lewis and the News tribute act, The Heart of Rock and Roll. I have recently begun playing with this act and sharing the stage with Scott. In this podcast episode, we talk about touring, playing live, arranging background vocals, music theory, our love of yacht rock music, and more. It's going to be a great discussion, but before we get started, I want to invite all of my podcast listeners to visit my website, guitarmusictheory.com. Answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that is calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, playing guitar solos, or you want to delve deeply into music theory, I have a free course for you. I can put you on a plan to fill gaps in your knowledge and fill gaps in your playing so you can become a better guitarist, move forward, and reach your music goals. Enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, we are rolling. So welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast, Scott Sheriff.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of what you do, and it's an honor to be on the podcast today. And of all the podcast studios with seafoam green ukuleles, this is the most fabulous I've ever been in.
So and that's up here in a corner that doesn't get seen much. So, yeah, I bought that little thing for my daughter, so to plunk around a little, the line sleeps tonight.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, we're coming off of a big weekend here. We played together with an act called The Heart of Rock and Roll, which is America's #1 tribute to Huey Lewis in the News. So we played a gig together Saturday night. And I am new to this lineup. I played my first gig with the band back in August at City Winery in Nashville, and then I played a couple gigs here over this past weekend, and I hope to do more. I love it. I got connected to this because Matt Revere, who is Carrie Underwood's guitar player and has been here on the podcast as well. He's a friend, and he was playing with that group and asked me to sub for him, and I think that he just had a little too much on his plate, and so kind of passed the gig on to me if the band would have me, and luckily they asked me to play more gigs. But anyway, I love the Huey Lewis material. I was so excited to have that opportunity when I heard that Matt was playing with that lineup. Because I played in bands for years in the past, but I was just kind of done with that, I thought. But when I heard he was playing with a Huey Lewis tribute act, I was like, oh, I might do that.
I might come out of retirement.
That might be a band I'd like to play with. So we can maybe talk about that more, but I'd really like to talk about some of the bigger things that you're involved in. So you are the keyboard player for Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, been there for 8.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And started in 2015, and I was just coming off a period where I wasn't doing any touring. I had been touring. The last act before that was with Kenny Loggins, where I served as music director from about 2007 till around 2011-ish, 2012. And played keyboards and sang background vocals with him. And so just kind of around town kicking around, playing tribute bands, doing occasional session here and there, doing some internet files, transcription work, notation work, etc. And then Carrie's music director called me and asked me if I'd be interested in auditioning for the position, and so they picked me after hearing me sing. They didn't hear me play. Mark knew enough about my playing that he didn't need to be sold on that, but they wanted to make sure that my singing was going to work with Carrie and going to be a good blend, and so here we are 8.5 years later.
You mentioned Mark. Tell my listeners who Mark is.
Mark Childers is our band leader and bass player, has been with Carrie since the very beginning. Not as music director the whole time, but a vast majority of the time he's been her music director. And so he and I go back to the early CCM days when I played with Steven Curtis Chapman, and Mark was making his way through a bunch of different CCM artists for him, Point of Grace, Avalon, Carmen. He played with a bunch of different acts. So we never were in the same band together. We were kind of in the same industry as sidemen. Sideman being, musicians that go out on the road and tour with artists, as part of their tour. Occasionally they might make their way onto a record here or there, but primarily they're called upon to do the touring and to play the music live when these artists go out on the road.
So you're playing keys with Carrie Underwood. Now, if there's someone listening that's a huge Carrie Underwood fan, what is like the most recognizable keyboard part from some song that you perform with her?
It might be the introduction to Jesus Take the Wheel. Because there's a guitar part that goes along with that. So those two together, it's very recognizable. That was one of her biggest hits. There's a song called Two Black Cadillacs that kind of starts off with a piano motif. That might be pretty recognizable to a hardcore Carrie fan. Maybe Blown Away. But there's a lot of her songs have these particular piano motifs that repeat and are pretty recognizable for the hardcore fans.
And so, like when you play, like you just played a little bit of "Blown Away" there. Like as soon as you start that, does the crowd go wild because they recognize it?
The song doesn't quite start like that, but that's kind of the signal that okay, we're going into the verse, because that song gets rearranged quite a bit. It gets its own treatment in Vegas for our residency show, and we kind of rocked it out a little bit more when we did our Guns N' Roses series of dates this past summer. So it usually kind of just starts out with little power chords. So there's really nothing there piano-wise to get recognized, but once that verse hits, and
Gotcha.
It kind of breaks back down to that motif.
Nice. A little something for the Carrie fans while they're out there. So you mentioned that your audition mainly focused on your singing. Like Mark, the musical director, he was familiar with your keyboard playing, and he's like, you got what it takes there, but the singing was critical. So that's interesting. Some of my listeners might not think about this as we look at different players who are backing up different artists, and we might be evaluating their playing, but we don't think about it might have been their singing, their backup vocal abilities that got them the gig. I know that when I first started playing just cover band stuff and party band stuff, the singer looked around and said, "Guys, where are you on the backups?" And I was like I showed up learning my guitar parts. Like I didn't think about backup vocals.
Yeah.
So I had to just totally throw myself into that world and took voice lessons and learned how to sing in harmony.
Yeah, you really took it
stuff
seriously then.
Right.
Sure.
And because I learned quickly that
it could be the difference between you and the next guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was then known as the guy who could play guitar or bass, and I would sing the harmonies. I had to sing a lot of harmonies in the Huey Lewis, act.
Oh yeah, that lead part is definitely one of the more primary harmony parts. But yeah, that's always been part of my you know, part of my toolbox that I bring into a gig, then I think it's always, you know, really been valued. When I was with Steven Curtis Chapman, I think he recognized early on that I could sing background vocals and arrange background vocal harmonies, so he made me his band leader pretty early on in the process, and I was always kind of the guy who was telling everybody what part was going to be theirs to sing. And I always would notate them out just so I could remember, because people would ask me, what's my part again? And I'm not going to memorize everybody's parts, but I can at least refer to a piece of sheet music. Okay, this is what the background parts are. And when you're playing with artists that, you know, sometimes take 3 or 4 months off, that stuff goes away, you know, temporarily anyway. You need something to rewind and remind you, oh, okay, this is what I was doing. So even if it's my part, sometimes I'm often referring to notation charts that I've made, even of my keyboard parts or my vocal parts. So, and the same thing when I got the job with Kenny Loggins. I think he you know, noticed that I could sing and that I was kind of telling people, you know, what their part should be to make it sound good. And he's real big on background vocals. He loves to feature his band, and even in step out lines during the. If you think about Footloose, there's that middle part of the song. You got to turn me around and get your feet on the ground. So that's all. He would, you know, give that out to different guys in the band.
I was testing you there to see if you're in key. You were singing in B flat.
Yeah,
What
well,
is it in?
What's weird is that if you
It's in A, isn't
if you
it?
listen to his record, it was very speeded. It's not.
Okay.
It's in the cracks. It's somewhere in there between A and B flat. He does it in A, but the record is almost sped up so much that it's almost B flat. But
Well, I give you credit. I mean, you
It's
just
B flat flat, or it's A sharp sharp. You know,
you
It's-
just sang that without a reference, and you were a half step within key. So that's pretty good.
So he recognized that, and when the current music director, who was playing with Kenny at the time, he left to pursue some German opera singing, which is pretty amazing that he's that you know, diverse, or what's the word I'm looking for. He can sing pop, he can sing rock, he can sing opera. So it's always been a thing for him. He wanted to pursue German opera. So he left the band, and Kenny promoted me to music director. So then I was kind of in charge of assigning out all the vocal parts. And so if a new song came into the show, you know, that's okay, who's going to sing what? And I knew where everybody's ranges lie, and so I could kind of determine who would sound best on which part. So it's always kind of followed me through. And same thing when I got to Carrie's band. You know, I wasn't hired to do it, but I was hired definitely as a singer. They were looking to, when it came time to replace the keyboard chair, the music director wanted to do it with somebody who could also sing background vocals. And so that first tour, it was me and our female background vocalist, Sydney, and there was one guy in the band, Jimmy, who also sang. So the three of us, we took care of most of the background vocals, but then over the course of the years, the personnel's changed, and Matt, like you said, Matt Revere came into the band. He's a great singer, and then we got Jordan Lawson in the band, who plays fiddle and 8,000 other instruments, and he's a good singer. So now we got a good nucleus of 4 really strong singers, and so there's really so we've got a nice, whether it's doubling and layering, or even the 3-part stuff, 4-part stuff, we've got a lot of singers that cover that stuff. And so I was kind of put in charge of telling everybody what they need to sing. And it was kind of interesting. We played the Howard Stern show on Sirius, and you can YouTube this. If you YouTube Carrie Underwood, Mama, I'm Coming Home on Howard Stern, afterwards Howard talks about, how did you guys did great harmony there, how did you all know what to sing? And Matt turns around and says, we just asked Scott. So it was a nice moment to be recognized, and Howard's like, that's great, so Scott, you're just kind of like the arranger guy. And so he kind of was able to showcase me for a second, and you know, Carrie mentioned it too. Yeah, Scott's kind of our onboard arranger. You know,
I saw that, and then he even said, well, let me hear you do those vocals again,
Yeah,
like
so
a cappella.
yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, so that was a cool moment. And
He also highlighted Matt
yes, he highlighted everybody. He
by mentioning his muscles.
yeah. Everybody kind of got their moment to say, you know, something about what they did. And so I've done some string arrangements for Carrie as well for award shows or special for our Easter thing at the Ryman. I did a little bit of a string arrangement for that, and so that's kind of pushed me in directions that I don't spend a whole lot of time doing, but I can. I just don't get asked to. But so it's nice when they do. I can pull out the old Sibelius program and start scoring strings and figuring out what works, and get out my various string libraries in Logic and listen to the different arrangements and see what works.
Well, so back to background vocals, I think that a lot of times that falls on keyboard players just because the nature of the instrument, you got everything laid out there in front of you. Like
it's more linear.
It's more linear. If you're going to start going through parts and figuring out what, we all kind of turn to the piano player, like, play us the line.
Yeah, it's
we
hard
don't
to
typically turn to the bass player or the guitar player,
It's hard to play 3 background vocal parts on a guitar. It goes like this.
Now, with that said, though, so in my early days of playing in bands, when I realized how critical the background vocals were, I was the one that arranged them. So, we'd be working on, Celebration or something like that by Kool and the Gang, and, I was the one that was like, wait, what key is that in? It's actually an A flat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah. I'm trying to think. Because I remember... Right. Yeah, I did that on the...
So it's on a G flat chord. It's like flat.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, now it's coming back to me. And so they are everybody who's got this note. And then, and so on. Just because I was like the most knowledgeable about music back then, so it kind of the
theory definitely bleeds into that, making it more easier and naturally to fall on you for that.
So you mentioned that Mark is the musical director, MD.
Yes,
which means musical director. What I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and then you were the musical director for
Kenny Loggins.
Yeah. So what is the job description of a musical director?
Musical director, you're kind of in charge of taking the onus off the artist to have to kind of monitor the band and their parts, and you're kind of in charge of just making sure that the band is all on the same page musically, as far as making sure everybody's playing the right parts. If you're kind of also the band leader, as far as communications come from management, they come through you, and then you kind of disperse it to the band. If there are any kind of playback tracks involved, that usually falls on you to make sure that those are correct and that they're following the correct song form. You're just kind of like a record producer would be in the studio. You kind of oversee everything music-wise and putting that part of the package together so that the singer can just kind of come in and do their thing and know that all the music parts are taken care of. Everybody's singing the right parts, playing the right parts, playing the correct arrangement, that the tracks are all in sequence and correct, and that they're all at the right volume in relation to each other. In my case with Kenny, sometimes it was preparing charts if we were using a local choir or some guest symphony musicians. He had quite a collection of orchestral arrangements, and we would do shows with symphony orchestras. I would kind of be in charge of speaking with the conductor, and sometimes I would actually have to conduct the conductor from the keyboard chair so he knew how our retards, when we came to slow down, he can't just guess how the band wants to slow down, so he would kind of watch me and conduct while he is watching either my head bob or my hand move or whatever. I would make sure that all the orchestra charts were correct, because we would make edits to the song, sometimes cut down sections in half or or that kind of thing. Just kind of oversee everything musical, so that's one less thing that falls on the artist's plate.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Because like you're responsible for your own parts, and your background vocal parts, but then you also need to pay attention to what everybody else is doing. So if a guitar player hits the wrong chord here or there, or another instrumentalist something is off, it's your job to catch that and correct it.
Yeah. And it's there's a lot happening, especially in Carrie's band. Mark's got a lot to think about. There's 8 people on stage. With Kenny, it was bass, drums, another guitarist, and keys, and then Kenny. There was most of the time there was just 5 pieces. So I could definitely tell if there was a chord wrong, it's either me or it's one other guy, maybe Kenny, but I doubt it's Kenny because he wrote everything. So generally it was a little bit easier to hear where any discrepancies were coming from in that situation. And that comes in the hiring process too. When you hire guys and do the auditions, you can kind of tell from how they prepared for the audition, how good they're going to be at interpolating parts that they hear on record and transferring them over to their instrument for a live show. So if you hire the right guys, your job becomes easier. And so that's the goal of all the music directors, is to just hire the right people that you're not giving yourself a bunch of extra work.
So to be a musical director, you can't just be an ordinary musician. Not that I would put an ordinary musician down or anything. You really have to be someone that is just is a big picture person and is aware of everything that's going on. And you also need to be someone that's very much an analytical person who's very much into the details of things as well. And that's not what most musicians are. Typically people are just into their instrument and their part, and they're feeling it that way. And oftentimes, if you ask a bass player, hey, did you pay attention to what, the keyboard player or the guitar player did on a song? Like, they would just shake their head, like they're in their zone. So it takes a different type of person who just can pay attention that way.
Yeah. And that it helps, at least for me. I'm the music director of all the local bands that I play in, and we'll probably get to that later in the conversation. But what I do before I introduce any song into our repertoire is I go through it all and I chart out all the parts so that I know and can look at a visual representation of what's the bass player supposed to be doing on this song. Because it's when you get 3 or 4 bands going, you're just never going to remember everything. So I at least have that. For one thing, I have it to send to them so they can learn it, but I will also have it to refer to. If somebody asks me, what's the guitar do on the chorus to that song? Well, I just look at my chart that I wrote, and it's, okay, that's what. Then I can tell them what their part's supposed to be, because I've already pre-listened to it, analyzed it. You're never going to be perfect in what. I'm sure the parts that I write down on these charts aren't 100% accurate, because everything's mixed into a stereo field, and some parts get lost. It might be a low note that gets buried behind a bass note or something. Just last night, as a matter of fact, I went to see Christopher Cross live, and when it got to his big song, the theme from Arthur that he wrote, they were doing the tags at the end, and there was a background vocal part, and there was a lead up to a part, and I had never heard that before, but it made total sense because the vocal part seemed kind of random to me, but I just kind of notated it the way I heard it, and that's how we've always performed it. And now it just makes so much more sense because they had the background vocals turned up so much more than they are on the record. I said, oh, that's what the part's supposed to be. So now I can go back into my files and fix that, and the next time we play it with our Yacht's Landing band, we'll be that much closer to how Christopher did it. So.
All right, so we talked about your role as musical director with Kenny Loggins, and we talked about how you also, part of the responsibility there could be arranging the backup vocal parts, even though you're not the musical director for Carrie Underwood. Am I correct that you said that duty kind of got thrown onto you? Like, so you helped with arranging the background vocals and stuff?
Yes, it's something I enjoy doing, and Mark's got tons of stuff on his plate, and he's fine with delegating that to me, and I'm fine doing it because I just want it to be right. So, and everybody kind of appreciates that, and they're fine with me doing it too. So it's just kind of happened naturally.
And then I used to do that back in the band days, even though I typically was the worst singer in the band. I think I always had the best ear for music and hearing things, so I would typically work things out. So I thought it'd be fun to maybe take a song from the Huey Lewis set list, because there's tons of background vocals. That band they were so good with everything. You listen to that, to those Huey Lewis songs, they're just so rich with not only harmonies, but the instrumentation, the guitars, the rhythm guitar parts, just the lead lines, the melodies, the keys, all of the interplay of all the instruments is just so well composed and put together. Anyway, I don't want to get too off track here. So I thought we'd take the song "Do You Believe in Love," key of B. It might be actually fun to maybe talk about, let's get into the harmonies, but before we do, maybe talk about some of the parts. What are you playing at the beginning of that? It comes in just with like a...
Okay, so on that song I play a clavinet, so it's just kind of... We play the live version, just kind of starts with quarter notes, but then once the song starts... Definitely some clams in there, but anyway, that's kind of the part that I play on that one.
Let's see. So we have the verse and everything, and then when we get to, do we want to jump straight to the chorus, or actually no? The backup vocals come in the second verse.
Yeah.
For the. Yeah. Hoping.
Yeah.
And I got assigned the alto parts, and I'm not an alto. So I have to squeak out, those parts. Let's see. Once we get to the chorus,
You're really squeaking them out in the chorus.
What's that?
Are you on the top part in the chorus?
I'm on
the sax player.
I'm on the B.
Okay. So the sax player's higher than you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know what? I would almost rather have a part that was lower or higher, because if it were higher, then I could just use falsetto. But with the B, it's probably because it's in the break of my voice there, and I can't figure out. It's difficult for me to do it either way.
Do I sing falsetto? Do I try and belt it out? Yeah.
Well, let's play through those parts. So on the chorus, I'm up there on the, Let me hear you play just the vocal parts on the keys. Yeah, so, this is what's so amazing. It's like what you were just playing with your right hand there, that's just the vocal parts. And then you have all the instrumentation. So it's like as if there wasn't enough going on in the song, and then we had to get all those vocal parts, and they need to be so prominent and strong and over the top.
Yeah.
So let's break that down. So we're in B here. So what's the lead line? What's the melody there?
Well, the lead singer kind of answers the background vocal part kind of by itself. The package is the melody. I don't know that there's any particular note inside that triad package, triad meaning 3 different notes. That's just kind of that thing is the hook. And that was kind of the guy that wrote it. Mutt Lange was a huge songwriter, producer, Bryan Adams, Shania Twain, and he was kind of famous for writing these huge, enormous pop hooks and layering tons of background vocals. And so, that huge vocal sound is the hook in and of itself.
The wall of vocals.
The wall of vocals. Yeah, the lead just kind of echoes. The singers go, "Do you believe in love?" And then the lead, "Do you believe in love?" It's just kind of an echo thing.
Gotcha.
So I don't know what part of that stack necessarily is the quote-unquote
So
melody.
are you singing the low end of that?
Yeah, I sing, "Do you believe in love?"
Why couldn't I get that part? Do you believe in love? And then let's go through them. So
And your part is?
And is the next part B? Okay, that's my part.
Yeah.
So let's try to sing it together. I'll sing my part. 2, 3, 4.
Do you?
Whoops. I'm hearing your part now. Do you
believe
half
in
step.
love?
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Do you believe in love? Do you believe it's true? Do you believe in love? Ooh.
No, I'm ooh. Aren't you? Ooh. Then I come in with. So now I was
There's
singing
a part above you that the sax
So
player
and then
sings.
what's Steve singing?
Do you believe in love? Do you believe it's true? Do you believe in love? Ooh.
Yeah. So
He's
cool.
way up there.
Now, as we were just singing that, I was singing falsetto there. Do you believe in love? But that just doesn't cut it. I tried that when we were rehearsing and stuff. It just wasn't strong enough. It works on the oohs part, like at the end when we're doing the yeah. Wee-oo. What's your part there? So, and in a live setting, I would be doing that as loud as I can. But for the main chorus, I didn't feel like it was strong enough. So I tried to belt that out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Scream.
Do you? It's easier when you're on a noisy stage,
Right?
Because
And
you can just let loose and just belt it out. But it still was. It was kind of shaky. It's just in that. It's too high for me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be singing that note. But I think that
It's more powerful enough than you think when you get it in the stack and you get it mixed with the front of house mixes it. I definitely know the feeling of feeling like I don't know that this is cutting it, because there's a point where I sing a note. Sometimes we'll start off the set with church bells, and that's one of my higher songs to sing, and I always like it to be further into the set so I can warm up, because I have some high B's like you're talking about to belt out in my full voice. Fold your hands and close your eyes. Yeah. So I like to sing that in full voice, but when it's kicking off the show and I haven't had, a proper warm up or a long sound check, I have to sing it in falsetto. But I've heard playback of the show from fans or live mixes or whatever, and it sounds fine in the mix. So I wouldn't necessarily feel like you have to kill yourself belting out those high B's, because it's just you singing the note in tune, goes a long way when it comes to mixing and blending.
Well, I know, right. And so I did keep that in mind. I'm like, look, as long as I'm fairly close, it's going to sound good in the mix, blended with the other voices and all the parts there, as long as I'm not noticeably flat or, my voice isn't cracking.
Yeah, and sometimes when you belt out, it might help you at least feel like you have the right power, but it also might affect the blend negatively, because the timbre that you're exuding doesn't necessarily mesh with what everybody else is singing, as well as a lighter tone. Generally in background vocals, if you're doing something huge like a big gospel choir where everybody's belting, then that's the thing. But most pop stuff, the lighter tones tend to blend better than when you're just belting them out.
Really? Well, I should make a note here for next time we might have a rehearsal or during sound check. Maybe run through that chorus and try it a couple different ways, because I felt like the falsetto wasn't cutting it, and I really needed to have it full voice.
Are you on ear monitors during the show?
Not the last two. I wasn't.
Yeah, that also can, if you're in a wedge and you're singing in falsetto, a wedge being a floor monitor that's a speaker. When we play live, sometimes we have monitors in our ears, and that's always the preferred way, especially for me anyway, as a singer, because pretty much no matter which way I sing, I will hear myself just fine. And if I'm falsetto, I can get a little closer to the mic. But when you're on a floor wedge and the band's kicking and belting, and you're trying to sing a part in falsetto, without a monitor guy who's making changes for you for each individual song, they could, if you're on a world tour with a huge budget, then you have a monitor guy whose job is to cater to each musician on stage. Even on a per song basis, you can say, hey, I sing in falsetto on this song. Can you give me a little more of my voice on this song? Boom, problem solved. But when it's just you in a local theater and you have a floor wedge and no monitor person once the show starts, because a lot of the time that's the situation we're in when we're in these theaters or clubs. And once the show starts, his job is to mix the show, and you can't get a signal to him to turn up your voice in the monitor from the stage. A, that's awkward and weird, and two, B, he's not going to probably see you or hear you without it being a huge interruption to the show. Whereas in a major tour, you can kind of look to the wings and the sound guy catches your eye, and you can point to your voice and give a finger up and say, and boom, he knows exactly what you're doing. So these are considerations when you're playing on these local circuits in situations where it may not be the optimal monitoring ways, where you feel like I got to push because I can't hear myself. And plus, you can't hear yourself, you can't really lock in on your pitch. So that's why you feel you got to belt it out so that at least you can hear it. Okay, I'm singing the right note, whereas I'm singing falsetto, I can't even hear what I'm singing, so I don't know if I'm even singing the right note.
Yeah. Well, and mic technique comes into play too. So if I'm using a soft voice, I'm going to be right on the mic.
Yeah.
And then for Do You Believe in Love, I am several inches away from the mic because I'm basically shouting, just
top of your voice, top of your range.
Yeah, and trying to get that out. Well, this is cool, and I love singing backups too. That's one of the things about playing in bands in the past that I loved. It was something that I didn't know anything about when I started, because I was just so in guitar mode that all I thought about was guitar, and I showed up, thinking I was going to impress everybody with how well I had learned all the guitar parts. And as soon as someone said, "Where are the backup vocals?" and I was like, oh wow, there's just so critical to so many pop songs and stuff. But anyway, I ended up really throwing myself into it and really liked it, and I really enjoyed singing in harmony over the years. It's just and I also I realized that's part of what I loved about these songs. When I listen to The Cars or something, Elliot Easton is awesome.
Yeah.
But the whole band is great, and the vocals are just, wall of vocals, right?
Yeah.
Mutt Lange, I think, produced some of the Cars stuff too, didn't he?
Very well may have, yeah.
Yeah. And when I go to see bands, it's always a little disappointing if they're covering a song, and I'm like, oh, guys, where you're here on the chorus, and one person is singing, and there's four voices on the,
Yeah, it's definitely the curse of being a cover band is okay, now we have to live up to the original, if that's what we're shooting for. So,
especially if you got me in the audience.
Yeah, me too. Oh, I'm totally with you. Yeah.
Or you.
Yeah, even going to see the original artists, and I'm like, okay, let's hear these backgrounds. And I was never disappointed. I saw Huey twice before he couldn't perform anymore, so I was never disappointed. It was just always great. And you can look them up on YouTube. They've sung the national anthem numerous times, and it's always a cappella, and the parts are just impeccable and just right on the money. They are just famous for doing that thing,
So while we're on that now, who actually Wasn't it Johnny Cola? Didn't he do most of the arranging of the background vocals?
I think so, probably. I don't know for a fact, but it kind of sounds like, from what I hear from other folks, that that was kind of one of his things.
So Johnny Cola was the sax player
and rhythm guitar.
Guitar player, but I think in the studio, Chris Hayes tracked most of the guitars.
That would not surprise me. Yeah.
And then I think live, he would do most of the overdriven and lead guitar parts. So Johnny Cola would play some rhythm guitar, or then he plays sax. But then did he arrange the horns and everything for their songs?
That I'm also not positive about. I know they utilized a lot of the Tower Power horn section guys, and I don't know if one of them took that under their wing to do the arrangements, or maybe Johnny did. So,
yeah.
There were songs where he would just stack his own saxophone in the recording, and so, I would assume he had the knowledge and the chops to do it, so it may very well have fallen into his jurisdiction in the band.
Such a great band. I mean, obviously Huey Lewis was had a golden voice and was a great writer.
Yeah, sings deceptively high too. He's got that gruff, he's got that raspy, sound to his voice, but he gets up there on some of those songs. He was definitely a tenor, not a baritone.
Yeah. And then you add Chris Hayes, who was just a fantastic guitar player, who just wrote, these just iconic parts. Oh, you want to play with me? Should we do this again? I saw yours.
Hang on a second. Let me.
All right, we'll do this again. Right. Scott's going to join me. Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Unbelievable,
Yeah, so melodic.
And then he would
tone for days. He was a jazz cat who ended up in a pop band, and he just went with it.
Then he would do stuff like this. Just all these really killer rhythm guitar parts, clean guitar parts, just that all were part of, when I listen to that music, it's just like a puzzle, all these pieces that just fit together and fill different spaces. So you got Huey, you got Chris Hayes, then like Johnny Cola, the background vocals and the horns were so good. The rhythm section was excellent. Forgive me, I don't know the name of the bass player.
Billy Gibson was the drummer, and Mario, I can't remember his last name, but he was the bass player.
And then, of course, we can't leave out
Sean Hopper.
Who came out to see the band Sunday night. And so we all got to meet him, like the Sean Hopper, a member of the original band that we are paying tribute to. And that was... Now, you had known him and had communication with him?
Yeah. I'll try and shorten the story, but when I was playing with Kenny Loggins, we had a front-of-house engineer. He mixed Kenny. His name was Jim Moran. We called him Bugsy, but Bugsy was also Huey Lewis's front-of-house sound guy. So when he was booked on Huey, he was mixing for Huey, and he would send a sub for Kenny. But he was double dipping, and he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He died of cancer, but was a fantastic front-of-house engineer and spent many years with Huey Lewis in the news. And so my wife and I were vacationing in Las Vegas and noticed in one of the local magazines or whatever, hey, Huey Lewis is playing at just basically Las Vegas. It was a town called Primm, which is about 50 minutes outside of Vegas towards the California state line, in a casino. So I contacted Bugsy and said, hey, can you get me tickets and backstage passes? And he said, sure. So my wife and I went to see Huey, and afterwards we went backstage, and they were having a really fun party meet and greet, and I kind of made my rounds with the band, got pictures with everybody, and I ended up talking to Sean for quite a while, and we kind of became, at that point there was not a whole lot of social media, so we were more email buddies at that point. And we hadn't spoken to each other in a long time, but I saw where he was playing with a friend of mine in Minneapolis in one of these rock and roll all-star bands where they find guys who have played with different artists, and then they put that band together and they go out and they pay tribute to all the different artists that they played with. So I had Kenny Loggins, former bass player, and then Sean Hopper, and there's probably somebody from Prince's band, someone from Steve Miller's band, and they're all out there playing a gig, and I see that Sean's playing with my friend Paul, and I said, "Oh, how did you run into Sean Hopper?" And he said, "He lives in Minneapolis." And I had 4 days off coming up in Minneapolis with Carrie. That's the way the tour was routed. And so I got back in touch with Sean and said, "Hey, I see you've been playing with Paul. That's great. I'm going to be in Minneapolis for 4 days. And just so happens, I've just started playing with the Huey Lewis tribute band. I'd love to get together." So we got together and had coffee and kind of rekindled our relationship. And we're just talking shop in a Caribou Coffee for 2 hours plus. And we just became really fast friends. And now that keeping in touch is even easier with text messaging, and he sends me videos of if I get stuck on a part to where it's buried in the mix and I'm just wondering what exactly is he playing. I mean, I can get close to it, but the inquiring mind in me wants to know what exactly he played, because chances are it was easier than the thing I'm coming up with. I just can't quite dig it out of the stereo mix. So he went so far as to set up an iPad over his keyboard on a mic stand and a mic clip, and was sending me videos of him playing through Huey Lewis songs. So
now that is not fair.
I know it's not fair. So I could literally see it's kind of his parts have, to be honest, they've grown and changed and evolved over the years to where I know that what he's showing me isn't exactly what is on the record, but still it's cool to see, oh, that's how he's playing it now. He's adding stuff as we do. We get maybe a little bored or want to change it up, or someone else in the band starts changing their part and we want to change ours to better complement theirs. And so it's been really interesting to see. And I've learned tons from watching him, especially in his B3 playing. He just the way he structures chords. He likes to double the top note in a lot of his voicings. When he does organ, and typically it's just we're playing with our right hand only, but he really gets his left hand involved, especially in some of those solos like Stuck With You. And he does some really cool stuff at the end and the beginning of Hip to Be Square. That's one of my favorite songs to play with that Huey tribute, because the organ part is so stinking cool.
Maybe we need to play a little bit of that.
Well, I don't have the greatest organ sound over here, but we can see what we can dig up here. Is there a speed? Let's see.
Steve is playing the Roland RD2000.
You can call me Scott. Everybody else.
Excuse me, Scott. Steve, Scott.
Busting his chops.
Steve
here we go.
Nieves is the saxophone player for the Huey Lewis tribute band.
So where is my Leslie speed? That's the only thing I've left to... I've got to figure out here. Do we talk about what a Leslie is to your listeners?
A Leslie is that old cabinet with the speaker that would
like
oscillate inside. Guitar players used it also.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan used to use it, and
let's see, tremolo. Is that what it is? Is that what they're calling it? Okay, rotary speed. There we go.
Right. How about we take a little break? We'll hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be back with
Hip to be square.
We are back, and we are hip to be square. Shall we play this together?
Sure.
Count me off.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so
Cool.
it's just he uses both hands when he's making those big fat chords. So we've got a E7, and he has a 13 in there. So it's a big E7 with a 13. The 9 isn't in his voicing, but everything else is. So
How is that stacked specifically?
it starts with 7's actually on the bottom,
Okay, so you got D,
and then the root.
which I can't do.
Yeah, you
so
can't do.
well,
Guitar
I'll do it like
strings
this.
are too close.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's next? The third?
And then the third.
Oh, gosh. All right.
And then the fifth, and then the sixth, and then the root again on top. So it's a big 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 voice chord.
And then do you have a C sharp like
Yeah.
on top? Yeah, that's not going to happen on
Not
the
on guitar, no. And then he just, with a simple shifting of a couple fingers, you get a 4 dominant 7 with a 9 in it.
Yeah.
So you have without, the root's not even in that voicing. The bass player's playing the A, and then there's the third and the fifth. There's the 9, the 7, a doubling of the 5, and a doubling of the 3. So he just kind of goes, that's a keyboard trick. You can with just a simple move of 2 fingers, you can go from a 113 to a 4-9.
So I do something similar on a guitar. I can't do that full voicing, but I would do
Right.
something like,
Right.
and you can, another simple change will get you to the, if you're doing like a blues.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's even in the minor mode, there's a keyboard trick. You can go straight from a minor 9 to a 13 with just one finger move. Just changing one note in any 2/5, progression. You can sound like a jazz head. Yeah, it's just guide tones. It's reduced quite a bit for.
Now we actually paused this recording because we were trying to use the software instrument in Logic because you said it has like the best.
The Logic's or B3 organ is fantastic. It sounds so realistic. It's very, very good. It wasn't when it first came out, but somewhere along the line they tweaked it and improved it, and it was almost as though they didn't tell anybody, because all of a sudden it was aces. It was like, oh my gosh, this thing sounds 100% better than when I first bought Logic, and now it's all I use for virtual B3. It sounds so good.
We spent like 30 minutes trying to get
Yeah, we didn't know we were
Scott,
going to do this.
aka Steve's keyboard, connected to the computer because I'm using Logic to record this, so we could use the software instrument. And I was up in my attic digging through a box of cables trying to find a MIDI cable, a USB cable, and we could not get it connected.
Yeah, we just weren't prepared. I have 800 cables at home. But anyway, so what we were hearing was this RD2000's tone wheel organ, but we're listening in mono. So unfortunately, when it has a pretty nice Leslie simulation in stereo, but in mono, it sums both sides, and when the Leslie gets going fast, it just sounds very warbly and weird. So unfortunately, but kind of have to use your imagination.
Good enough for the Guitar Music Theory
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
Shall we give it to him one more time?
Sure.
Hip to be square. You ready?
Yeah.
Count us in.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Then it goes into that awesome rhythm guitar part, which I don't know because that was handled
that
by
falls with Tony.
Yeah, Tony, their guitar player, plays that. Well, that was fun. So I think, I had Matt on the podcast, gosh, like a year ago or more, where we like dissected and analyzed The Power of Love. And did you listen? Did you hear that podcast
Yes,
episode?
I sure did.
Yeah, because I think you commented on it.
I started a text thread about music theory of the bridge.
Yeah.
The modulation.
We might want to talk a little bit about that, but we talked a little bit, and Matt filled me in to say, like, hey, like Scott is the music nerd of pretty much any band that you're part of. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I took music theory as early on as sophomore year in high school. Started studying music theory. Had a fantastic high school music teacher. He was just so enthusiastic and so plugged into pop music, current pop music, and was always like making examples out of pop songs to keep his kids' attention. This part of this song is really just this, and he would show us the theory breakdown of whether it was a repeating ostinato or a chord progression that was borrowed from classical music or something like that. And then he had a synthesizer at the school, and so he kind of was showing us very basic analog synthesis. And they had a 4-track recorder, and part of our project was to write a 4-part. When you're studying theory, one of the earliest things at least in traditional music theories, you learn to write these little 4-part, whether it's just 4 bars, 8 bars. You're just trying to get from point A to point B and do it in 4 parts, and then he would have us record our examples on the synthesizer using different tones, using different analog tone on every part. So make the bass line a square wave, and make the tenor line a sawtooth wave, and so on and so forth. So it really captured our imagination and for pop music, and that's kind of where I started to just take my deep dive into music and musicians like David Foster and Al Jarreau, and the whole yacht rock thing that was basically the pop music of the day with Michael Jackson and Toto, and just bands that were really using rich, thick, lush harmonies, whether it was in the background vocals or even in their instrumentation, like we've been talking about with Huey. Just everything is so intentional. He didn't just sit down and have his band play their instrument for 4 minutes. The parts were really thought out. It's like, how can I play something that reacts to a guitar part, or plays in this hole and not get in this guy's way and not step on this guy's toes? And so it was all so well thought out. It just seems like today, with producers having infinite tracks, they just kind of turn on the Pro Tools rig and play something. Okay, play something else, and play something else, and then when it comes to mix, we'll just start reducing, and production. Producers become reducers, and they just start muting things and turning things off instead of, really taking the time to think through. So then it comes to guys like us. We have to go take it on tour, and we're going, how am I going to play all these guitar parts or all these keyboard parts? They just threw everything but the kitchen sink on there, and there really is no rhyme or reason. Sometimes there's not even any repetition, or that parts might be completely different, the second verse than the first verse, and so it makes it a little extra difficult sometimes to remember, I know my part in the first verse, but it changes a little bit in the second verse. Then it can get a little confusing when you start to stack hundreds of songs in these hard drives we call our brains, But
so even among professional musicians, they still will turn to you if they have a technical question, like if there's something, because I think Matt had said something like that. It's like, you told the story about being on Howard Stern, and Matt just said we just asked Scott or something like that.
Yeah, when it came to background vocals, yeah. But I mean, in the other bands I play in, I'm the musical director and the band leader. So if there's I make plenty of mistakes when I chart stuff out. So I've got a sax player. You might send me a text the week of a show. Hey, is this supposed to be G sharp? It says G natural in the charts. So then I got to go back and see if I made a notation error or whatever, or is this chord a F sharp minor over A? Are you familiar with the song, Chicago song, If You Leave Me Now? It was a pretty big ballad that they had. So when it gets to the bridge of that song, don't, baby, please don't go. I just want you to stay. At first, I had a D over E as the first chord to that second section. It's actually a B minor over E. It's more accurate. And so for years we were playing that Chicago song with the wrong chord on the chart. So, it's my guitar player pointed that out to me, and so he was kind of being the nerd at that point. And I was
you got corrected.
I did. Once. I got corrected, and I'm happy to be corrected. I want to get it right. So I'm not like gonna die on any hill if I listen back and somebody's picking something out that I got wrong. I just want to get it right.
Matt very much appreciates my attention to detail, and has pointed that out at times. And so he told me that like you and I are very similar that way. We're very, very analytical, and he mentioned that you're the guy that people would often turn to if things get complicated and they're like, okay, what's going on in this chord?
Yeah.
If Scott doesn't know, no one knows. So I did tell Matt the story at our rehearsal on Friday. You had corrected a chord.
I thought I had.
Yeah, and I was like, was I playing that wrong? And I was like, gosh, I thought I had that right. But I thought, I'm not going to question these Scott sheriffs. So I thought, okay.
And you were right.
Then you texted me, I think, an hour or two after rehearsal. You said, I just pulled up the song. You had it right.
Yeah.
And so I told that story to Matt. And he's like, so you got one on Scott? I said, yeah. And Matt's reaction was, I don't know who I hate more now.
It was after this, right?
Right. Yeah, but you thought it was, which I like. That sounds better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more. I mean, there's not too many people. Like, you're probably just playing a power chord there, I would imagine.
I'm doing D minor 7 there.
You're playing a full,
or I'm just doing the A, the C, and the F.
So you're playing the F triad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the song
Trouble in Paradise.
Trouble in Paradise by Huey Lewis and the News, which is one of just several tribute bands that you're part of. So how about we kind of segue into that? Obviously, Carrie Underwood is your main gig, so yeah, you tour with her. But when you have time off from that and in between, because with Carrie, you're out for like maybe a couple weeks at a time, and then you're back home?
Yeah, I mean, it's really random and totally non-uniform. So we could be gone for a month, we could be gone for 2 days, we could be gone for a week, 3 weeks. So, but actually, these started after. It started before even I was in Kenny Loggins' band. I was been playing with Steven Curtis Chapman. I was in his band, band leading his band in the early 2000s, and I had also been playing to add another band to this roster with a disco band here in Nashville, funk, soul, and disco called Delicious, and we would get dressed up in crazy, glittery 70s clothes, go out and play wedding receptions and corporate parties and just play these crazy disco songs and funk songs. And we would sit around at sound check, and instead of playing soul music, I would sometimes just launch into a Steely Dan song, and we found out that we had a lot of Steely Dan fans in the band, so they would try and play along. And what usually happens in cover bands when you try to play a Steely Dan song, you get to either the chorus or the bridge, and nobody knows how it goes. They can probably play the main riff, whether it's like Peg, or they might be able to play Pretzel Logic or something. But when it gets to the hard parts, they don't know how to play the rest of the chorus. whatever. But anyway, you get stuck. And then I finally said, I'm tired of getting stuck on these Steely Dan songs. So I started charting them from start to finish. And before I knew it, I had a book together, and we started what at that point was called Royal Scam, until we found that there was another Royal Scam band in New York State. So they sent us kind of a nice cease and desist email asking us not to use that name anymore. So although we've never been anywhere close to their market, and they've never been anywhere close to ours, I don't think. But anyway, we changed it to 12 Against Nature because Steely Dan had a Grammy-winning. Finally, they won their first Grammy with their record called 2 Against Nature, and we had a 12-piece band, 6-piece rhythm section, 4-piece horns, and 2 lovely lady female background singers. So we were a 12-piece, so we just decided to call ourselves 12 Against Nature. And we started playing in Nashville and corporate parties, and did a few out-of-state gigs at casinos and performing arts centers, state fairs, stuff like that. And that started in 2004 and became pretty popular down at 3rd and Lindsley. And so we added to that. While I was on the road with Kenny Loggins, I was able to make a contact with Jason Sheff, who was at the time lead singer with the band Chicago. He came into that scene at Chicago 18 and had been with them for a long time. He was moving to Nashville, and we had a mutual friend, and so I kind of greeted him when he came to town, and we hung out for a little bit, and I asked him if he'd want to come and sing with our band. And so he did, and I thought it was only appropriate that we learn a Chicago song for him to sing with us. So we learned 25 or 6 to 4 and brought the house down with that as an encore. And so we decided to go full Chicago tribute band and formed Make Me Smile with basically the same group of folks, a couple different. We needed a Cetera lead singer, so we enlisted Gene Miller to come in and sing with us. And we have another guy, Tim Buppert, now, who sings our Terry Kath leads and plays some percussion for us. So we do double bills, and we're doing one December 22nd down here in 3rd and Lindsley in Nashville with Chicago and Steely Dan all in one night. So that's going to be a pretty crazy fun tribute show. But yeah, for the most part, most people stay on stage, and we just rotate two or three off in between shows. And then that kind of spurred my interest in digging into some of the more yacht rock type material. We would occasionally play just one yacht rock song as kind of a specialty, like we would do a Boz Scaggs song at our Steely Dan show, because at the time there was this Dukes of September tour that was out, and it was Boz Scaggs, Michael McDonald, and Donald Fagen, and so they were kind of the core of a lot of great yacht rock music that came out in that era. And so I decided to start a band to kind of just focus on that stuff, and we called that Live from Ventura Boulevard. We kind of have rebranded with 70s clothes as a band called Yacht's Landing, and we play around Nashville. And we do everything from Ambrosia to America, Kenny Loggins, Michael McDonald, Doobie Brothers, throw some Steely Dan in there as well, and just really play a lot of that great stuff. Little River Band, James Taylor.
Oh my! You're speaking my love language right now, Scott.
It's mine too. So, I'm coming off Yacht Rock Week here in Nashville. I just saw David Foster play on Sunday. Christopher Cross, I saw him play last night. So I'm still high on a yacht rock buzz, pretty much sitting up here. But and then I do a solo gig around the west side of town I call it the One Man Yacht Club, but basically I just get booked under my name, and I go and play these restaurants and bars, and I do 3 hours of yacht rock with just me and my RD 2000 here, and some custom made tracks that I've programmed that I play along with, and it's super fun trying to recreate those records with plugins for horns and guitars and everything that I can't play, bass and drums. And it really lets me appreciate this music even more, digging into the super duper detailed intricacies of these parts and ghost notes that the bass player played, and the drummer, just Jeff Porcaro, just did so many little snare things and ruffs and and sometimes they even double tracked his hi-hat, like on Boz Scaggs' Lowdown, and so it's been super fun to get in there and try and really copy it as best as I could, and then I take that out and play it live, and it's super fun, and the people seem to dig it, because yacht rock is timeless, and it's definitely been embraced by generations who were nowhere near, even around when that music was out. They've still they've heard it, they love it, and they're drawn to it. So,
well, I was born in 1974, so that's kind of when a lot of that music was coming out, before and after that, and it must have made an impression on me or something at that age, because there's something about it that I love so much. So I need to invite my listeners, if you haven't done so already, you got to go to like Spotify or Apple Music and just search for their yacht rock playlists, and there's just these awesome songs by Little River Band and Ambrosia and Pablo Cruz and Boz Scaggs, and then kind of like some, I need to pull it up here. The Apple Music one is better.
Serious yacht rock's playlist is a bit deceiving. It's funny because the yacht rock community is really they're very vocal on social media, and the term yacht rock was actually coined by these comedians in LA who actually have a video series that's very funny, but it's not safe for work. I'll just warn you. But they reenact supposed how these songs were written and what might have happened, and they're bizarre. Of course, there's no way that this is what went on, but nonetheless it's super funny, and that's what. And so they coined this term yacht rock, and so they consider themselves to be the gatekeepers of deciding what is yacht rock and what is yacht rock.
It's essentially just the light rock of the 70s.
Well, it depends on who you ask. So there's certain things that they have decided are part of their definition of what determines yacht rock. So
my gosh.
There's a whole podcast called Yacht or Nyat, where they literally listen to music one song at a time, and they have what's called the Gene Yatsky scale, and they rate these songs from 0 to 100 on whether they're yacht or not, and if they don't at least score 50, they're nyat, and if it's 50 or above, it's a yacht rock song. And so it's hilarious. And then people get on these Facebook groups and they say, "Oh, is Tom Petty yacht rock?" And no. And the typical things that they use to define yacht rock is if it has a nice, they call it a shimmery EP, like that Rose,
electric piano.
Yeah, like that's in that Ambrosia song.
Oh, keep going. What are we in? B flat?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. We were talking about this before we rolled tape. I think that's one of the greatest songs ever written and recorded.
It's definitely in my top 5 for sure. Another one is Reminiscing by the Little River Band.
Oh my gosh. Little River Band. Incredible. Yeah.
So that's the Shimmery EP we're talking about.
So that's, if you have Shimmery EP, does that automatically...
Well...
That's a big qualifier
it helps,
for yacht rock?
Yeah. It helps if it has that doobie bounce.
The doobie bounce, like the Michael McDonald era.
Yeah, they call it the doobie bounce. You know,
okay.
Songs that bounce like
What
Steal
a Fool
Away.
Believes. Yes, Robbie Dupree.
You know,
you got What a Fool Believes in you.
Yeah, that's more of a piano doobie bounce.
Yes, the doobie bounce. Now,
and so forth.
Okay, let's go off on a tangent here.
And the song has to be about a fool, or if it's about a fool, and it gets a little higher bounce on the yacht scale, because it's about a guy who's just made a mistake and left the girl who was the right one for him, and now he's by himself and he's lonely and he's
so that means this song makes the scale. What is it?
Escape, yeah.
He was tired of his lady.
I was tired of my lady.
But as it turns out, it's you.
Yeah.
It was her all along.
It was.
Yeah. One of the dumbest but best songs ever.
And it's so simple. I mean, there's nothing to it. The chorus is the same as the verse.
Yeah.
And there's just that little...
Oh, wait. What are the chords there? It's F, A minor...
And then it's actually an F major 7 with an A bass.
Really?
Because the F is still in the chord. You know, whether or not the guitar part follows that or not, but the full harmonic evaluation. And so you have that rub.
Was that a G put in there? Yeah. And then right here?
4 over 5.
Oh.
C major 7 over E, and then
C major 7 over E, which is essentially an
like
E minor.
Yeah, but what you get the C B rub.
Oh, because you have the C in there too.
Yeah,
and I can't do that. So on guitar, I would just probably play an E minor.
Probably, yeah, that would work.
And then do you go to a D minor from there?
So hang on. D minor 7.
Oh, let's try it. Ready? I screwed it up already.
And then that passing chord.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Ready? Oh.
That's where they switched to the shimmery roads.
All right, got it. You ready? 1, 2.
Middle section?
3. The lead line. 1, 2, 3.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So cool. So I pulled up the Yacht Rock Essentials here on...
So What a Fool Believes is believed to be, by the guys who coined the term, the quintessential yacht rock song.
With the doobie bounce.
Yeah.
Now what? Oh, I wanted to go off on a little tangent here.
Is.
What defines the doobie bounce? What
is
it that
generally,
makes it...
if you're going down the music theory rabbit hole, it's using it's kind of using the syncopated piano thing you're kind of rocking back and forth with two chords that are a fourth apart from each other. So when you get to that section, the middle section, the B section, you have. So that's the doobie bounce. You're rocking back and forth in your right hand between D flat and A flat, but it all rides over a B flat bass. And then it's that same rhythm.
So let's see, which songs in the Apple Music Yacht Rock Essentials playlist has the doobie bounce? Well, let's just go through some of these songs. I'm curious. I bet you could probably play a little bit of all these. By the way, What a Fool Believes,
probably all in my
number one, top of the playlist.
Probably all in my solo.
Number
show.
2, Baby Come Back by Player. Yeah.
That has the
EP in it that you were talking about, electric piano?
Yeah.
Okay. Very yacht rock.
Spending all my nights, all my money going out on the town. Oh, listen to that shimmery.
You're killing me. We already did Biggest Part of Me, Ambrosia. By the way, Ambrosia is my grandmother's name, so
that's
I
pretty.
love that band. Steal Away, Robbie Dupree,
Yep.
played some of that. What about
that's also got some shimmery EP and the doobie bounce, so that's just so great. It kind of fades in.
Oh, augmented? 6? Does it go to the flat 7? No, it goes back down.
We called that a line cliche in Berkeley. It's
line cliche.
Chords that change, but one note at a time. So it's basically that A chord, an A augmented, where you raise the fifth, the half step, and then you take it to the sixth.
Yeah.
But in the verse, it goes one more and goes to the seventh.
Okay,
it goes
and then
to
it goes to the 4 chord.
Yeah,
so it's like a secondary
the 4
dominant.
major 7. Yeah,
So good. And it's also, what key are you in there?
A.
Okay. Well, if you were in D and did the same thing, you'd have baby, hold on to me. Has that change in it too? A line cliche, some half step movement there. Well, we might have to wrap up here soon, but there's so many. We might have to have a whole dedicated podcast where we just talk about yacht rock music.
Oh, I'm all about it.
It is so good here. In the meantime, my listeners can check out the Yacht Rock Essentials. But so you have a lot of different acts going on. You're playing with Carrie Underwood. You've got the Heart of Rock and Roll, which is a tribute to Huey Lewis and the News. You've got 12 Against Nature, which is a Steely Dan tribute. Make Me Smile, a Chicago tribute. Yacht's Landing, which is all this music here that we're talking about. And then you also will sometimes just play solo, where you sing and play, and you might be accompanied by some tracks, and you call that One Man Yacht Club, a.k.a. it might just say Tonight Live Music with Scott Sheriff.
Yes, and I'm also part of an Eagles tribute called
I forgot about that.
The Eagle Maniacs. Well, so did I, but they should not be forgotten because they
Eagle Maniacs.
One word, yeah. So that's been going strong for some years too. That's a really super fun band.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I would love to come out and check out some of these other acts because I'm a fan of all of this music. And by the way, regarding One Man Yacht Club, so I played in bands for years, and then we started using we call them sequences, there were MIDI sequences back at the time, to add some fake horns or strings to, some of the dance songs we were playing. And then we had a period where we could not secure a bass player, and so we all right, look, let's just put every song on a click, and we'll program the bass, and everything else will be live. And long story short, eventually I'm like, well, why don't I just play solo gigs?
Switch to okay.
And so I would just sing and play guitar, and I could do acoustic stuff if they just wanted acoustic, but if they wanted full band, I would have the tracks and minus the guitar and vocals, and I would throw in some harmonies and stuff like that. Yeah. And anyway, I called it One Man Jam. Kind of dumb, but instead of one man band, because when I first started it, I was doing a bunch of guitar oriented stuff, and I thought I'll extend the solos and jam. I had my looper pedal and was into that whole loop thing. But and that I ended up working a lot as a solo performer that way. But I ended up doing less jamming, because if you're doing sing-alongs, if you're doing Beatles and American Pie and Jimmy Buffett and Neil Diamond, you're going to get hired so much more than if you're doing an 8-minute version of All Along the Watchtower.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing a lot of the same material that party bands and wedding bands and stuff do.
Yeah.
Doing that solo thing, which I think is similar to what your
One
Man Yacht Club is.
I'm blessed in that I have a great job with Carrie, so I'm not looking to just pound the pavement and work wherever and whenever. So primarily the 3 spots I've been working are very close to where I live, and I suppose if the money's right and they really want it, I'll move it, but I'm not out there looking super hard, and along the same lines, I really get to choose what I play, and I play yacht rock. You're not going to hear, I'm not playing Brown Eyed Girl for you. I'm barely playing Piano Man, because that's not yacht rock, and that's not even Billy Joel's close to his best song. I'll play you 5 other Billy Joel songs that I absolutely love, but Piano Man's the same 5 chords back and forth.
Just the way you are.
And I don't play piano. I will play that song because it won Song of the Year.
How could you not play that one? The chords are so rich in that song.
Yeah, they are. They're fantastic. But you're not going to hear Living on a Prayer. You're not going to hear Sweet Caroline. You save that for the guy playing tomorrow night. But if you want to hear yacht rock, you're going to get some of the best of it right here. And I play stuff that's deep too. I play before there was Mr. Mister, there was a band called Pages that Richard Page was in, and it was fantastic. And it's super yachty stuff, and it's really great. So I do a Pages song. I do an Airplay song from when David Foster and Jay Graydon were in a band together before they had become super producers. They were just starting to hit it, and I play one of their songs, and so I get a little bit more deep into the yacht catalog. You'll probably recognize most of what I play. I play Georgie Porgy from Toto. That kind of surprises a few people. They want to hear Rosanna in Africa. Well, I'm not doing Rosanna. I can't sing Rosanna, but I can sing Georgie Porgy. And I make my way through Africa, but I brought it down a whole step because that chorus is just brutal on your voice. It's just hanging on that high A forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It's just the whole chorus is nothing but the note A, and that's the top of my range, and I'm just not gonna. I can't do that. Not after 3 hours. I can barely do a G, but I count on the crowd to help me through that one. But it's hard to avoid Africa when you're out playing yacht rock. That's kind of up there in the top 5 as well.
And then I got stuck with a B for Do You Believe in Love? No fair.
Luckily, you only have to hang on to it for
it's just the first note.
Second
right.
or 2.
Yeah, and then it's down a half step.
And then you start coming down. Yeah.
All right, well, we are going to wrap things up. So, Scott Sheriff, thanks so much for coming on to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. By the way, listeners, you can find Scott on YouTube. Just search Scott Sheriff on YouTube.
The official handle is TN, like the abbreviation for Tennessee. TN Keys. It's all one word, and you'll find all the stuff that I deem is fit to put on our YouTube channel. There, it's got a kind of a mixed bag of stuff, but it's hopefully all stuff that you'll like and be able to check out.
Awesome. And we've talked about probably having you come back on the podcast in the future where we might take a look at some specific songs and we'll kind of analyze them the way I've got this little series I call How Does This Song Work, where I just kind of play through a song and talk about it. And you would be a great guest to come on to do that. So we'll do that maybe for some yacht rock songs. But we're going to wrap up today's podcast. And could you play us out? Give us a yacht rock classic.
Michael McDonald, one of the captains of the boat.
All right, so podcast 147 is a wrap. I want to thank my guest, Scott Sheriff. Don't forget, if you haven't gone to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, to enroll in a free video course, just head there, answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I will send you free custom video instruction that is calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with playing lead guitar, bar chords, finger picking, playing worship guitar, or you want to delve deeply into music theory, I have a free video course for you. I can put you on a plan to help fill gaps in your knowledge and fill gaps in your playing so you can get better, move forward, and reach your music goals. So enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, guitar engineers, thanks for listening. I'm Desi Cerna. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and leave a review if you can. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.